I'm not a creative person, is typically the answer I get when I ask people, are there any sort of creative projects you're working on or you want to try out? It's almost as if being creative is this self selection process. You're either a creative have or have not, sort of like being born into the royal family, which is honestly a shame because creativity is absolutely essential to living an authentic life. And just from my observation, as a society, we're seriously lacking authenticity. And I just want to address that. How can we live more authentic lives by rediscovering our creativity? The way we view creativity isn't necessarily our fault. It has a lot to do with the sort of environments we're raised and educated at home and in school. I'm just speaking from personal experience here. So I'm from the United States. I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but at least in the US, I feel like art programs in school are sort of seen as this way to, help kids become more well-rounded, prepare their resumes or whatever for college applications and whatnot, rather than taken seriously as a way to actually build your life around. There's sort of this nice to have, not need to have, which is why in so many cases we've heard about here in the States, when education systems start to cut funding, the first programs to go are the arts. I feel like creativity is both revered and also discouraged at the same time. It's sort of like drinking alcohol, honestly, but that's another story. Creativity, it's like we admire the creative, what not just Beyonce telling the single ladies to stand up, but also like the slam poet just ripping verses on a Tuesday night at like a lonely bar, or the pianist that just starts playing in the middle of a crowd or public space. But at the same time, we discourage that creativity, right? We kind of steer people away from those paths. And that's exactly the same reason why we have such a respect and reverence for the creative, right? Because they're able to go against the grain. They're able to go their own path without the existing support of systems and societies. And there's a lot of uncertainty associated with that, a lot of fear that we might have. And that's exactly the beauty of being a creative, is that you don't necessarily rise above fear. I think fear is always a component. Instead, the creative learns to coexist with fear, to use it as this sort of tool to inspire more creative work. And this fear, this uncertainty, this instability that is associated with the creative careers or paths in life is exactly why so many parents discourage it. That's exactly why my parents did, right? In, I guess, their eyes as Asian immigrants, and even if you're not an immigrant family, it's like you don't typically see I guess, quote unquote, the normal or average creative living a super, I guess, societally conventional, if that's a way to phrase it, successful lifestyle, right? You often hear about the starving artist, the struggling creative, not the starving doctor or lawyer, right? And in their eyes, our parents, they just want what's best for their kids. They don't want to see their kids struggle, to pay the bills, unable to make it in the world. But at the same time, it's because they've kind of been ingrained with this conventional definition of success and what that means in our society. And they do so not out of fear, but out of love. It's interesting. When I ask people, the same ones who say, I'm not a creative person, well, what does it mean to be creative? They often don't have a strong answer. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if you can't define what something is, if you don't know what it entails, then how can you just not be it? If you ask anyone who considers themselves creative what it means to, I guess, associate yourself with that way of being, everyone's gonna have a different answer. Personally, when I think about, and I always give this same answer when people ask me what it means to be creative, I really think I believe creativity is the truest form of human expression, the living embodiment of one's thoughts, experiences, and emotions. If you put it that way, creativity can take on so many different forms beyond the mic, the brush, the violin, right? It can come in conversation through the questions you ask. How do you craft them? What order do you ask them and what do you follow up with? How do you share about yourself? And it all just comes down to you yourself defining what it means to be creative and to come up with that definition, that answer that is unique to you, free of any sort of outside influence of the media or people around you. And not to give a suggestion, but when I think about creativity and my own answer, I feel like the closest we can get to creativity is thinking about what it meant to us when we were kids. If there is one thing I hope we can all agree on from this conversation, it's that kids just know how to have fun. They know damn well how to be authentic because they're always playing, exploring their curiosity. They are expressing themselves with no restraints, for better or worse in a lot of cases. And I feel like that's, as a society, what we're lacking, right? I feel like as we get older, it's a natural part of growing up, rite of passage into adulthood, to kind of lose that creative side of us. We pick up this fear of judgment, of not belonging or not being successful, and that fear, when fear comes into the picture and we're not able to coexist with it, we let it overwhelm us, it stops that creativity, because creativity, it can't be forced. It has to come naturally. And we lose, with that fear that comes in, we lose that ability to just play, to explore, to express ourselves, to create without the fear of judgment. And in doing so, as society, as individuals, we lose that authenticity, that connection to our true self. I'm not sure how familiar you are with fitness or weightlifting, but if you are, feel free to stop me. Muscles, when they're not used or stimulated enough for a prolonged period of time, they start to atrophy or shrink in size. And the same goes for your creative muscle. The less you use it, the more it shrinks, to the point that you convince yourself it's gone. I'm not a creative person. But the thing is, muscles don't just disintegrate and evaporate into the air. disappear into nothing. They're always there. They might be a lot smaller, but they're always there. And your creative muscle, it shows up in little ways. When you're just doodling in the margins of your notebook or on a piece of paper when you're sitting in class or on some pointless meeting for work. When you're tapping away to the beat of the song you're listening to. When you are singing in the shower or when there's no one else around. When you feel this need to express how you're feeling, how you've been feeling this entire time. That's your creative muscle, yearning to be heard, to be used, to come to life again. And just like with any other muscle, there's this magnificent thing called muscle memory, in which once you start using a muscle again, it starts to come back. In fact, it comes back faster than it took to grow in the first place. And the same goes with your creative muscle. Once you start using it again, once you give yourself permission to be creative, to play, to explore, to express yourself, to be a kid, it'll come back. It always does. It's not just your inner child yearning to be heard. Society needs you to be creative. I need you to be creative because we are seriously deficient in authenticity as a society. And I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired of just being surrounded by people pretending to play grown up when all they really want to do deep down, whether they realize or have forgotten, is to just be a kid, to have fun, to explore, to play, to express, to create. So the question really isn't a matter of am I a creative person or not? It's really, will you answer creativity's call?